pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And the only item on the agenda is a presentation to the board of the 2013 Township Manager recommended and preliminary budget.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to introduce this preliminary budget this evening to the Board of Commissioners. Just want to go through some initial items here in which the schedule of the internal planning meetings when they actually began with staff, which began back in April of this year and continued to work through on numerous dates and times as we began to prepare the budget for 2013, as well as understanding and listening to a lot of the presentations that were made to the Board of Commissioners throughout this year. I want to thank the Board of Commissioners for all your time that you spent over the past 10 months looking at a lot of these issues and operational and financial position of the township as we currently sit. I think it was good for the board, it was good for staff, it was good for the CARFAC organization as well as the community to get some idea or some insight into a number of the issues that the township is currently facing. The remaining Board of Commissioners meetings are detailed here. They're out on the website as well, in which we have various public hearings set for public input, additional comments from the Board of Commissioners as well. Copies of the budget are available on the township's website. They were uploaded this afternoon. We have a few CDs that are available. If you want a CD, we will provide you with one. If you want a hard copy printed, we will provide that too as well. If you could let us know, and we will print one for you. We did not print a lot of those copies this evening because in the last 2 years, there were a lot of paper sitting back there that was not utilized, so this way we will print them, as well as we will have a copy available in my office too if someone wants to come in, and we will provide you space within this building to be able to review the township's budget. I want to thank the staff, all the staff, for their assistance in preparing this year's budget. They were involved throughout the process, had a lot of good comments and suggestions that I think we utilized within this year's budget proposal. I want to thank the department heads for a lot of time that they put in to preparing this year's budget. There's a lot of time that goes into this. I know a lot of late nights, early mornings, and weekends they spent preparing this, preparing the written narratives in here as well, and I think they've done an outstanding job. And I especially want to thank Bill White for compiling this 220-page document here. I think this is some of Bill's finest work, as well as part of this document is very interactive, so you can actually go in and as the board or any changes need to be made, they can be corrected through this process without a long period of time. I just want to recognize Bill for all his efforts in putting that together. One group I want to definitely point out and thank them for their efforts, and that's CARFAC. I tell you, the talent and experience that this organization brings to the township, a group of volunteers that this board put together, they've done an exceptional job and put just an extraordinary amount of time in helping us with this. They reviewed multiple proposals of the budget. They interviewed each of the department heads in regards to their budget. They worked on several projects and studies. They reviewed the final proposed budget, and they also, through their efforts in the review, they actually helped trim and recommended trimming over $369,000 from our original budget we had looked at. So there's a group and an organization that has worked hard, and I think the intent was from the board is to have public input and for their suggestions and ideas of what they came up with. And all those changes are reflected in tonight's budget submission. I know we keep pushing this out a lot, but I think it's important to know that where your real estate tax dollars go to, 71% of that goes to the school district, 17% goes to Delaware County, and 12% comes to Radnor Township. But the interesting point, though, of this is we actually then, out of that 12%, through the tipping fees, return over $200,000 per year to the county. Also, $65,000 goes to the school district for use of their facilities. And then we also fund the various community groups and organizations in the township, from the library, the senior center, Surrey Services, the Arts Center, and support for several parades that we also provide. So I think this is important to know as we continue to move forward. Over the past 2.5 years since arriving here, as well as a lot of the new department heads that have joined Radnor Township, we've been working during this period of time to get our arms wrapped around the organization here, look at our operations, the level of services and the financial impacts, the obligations, resources, revenues, tax rates, operating agreements, debts and the long-term sustainability of our operations as Radnor Township. The Board of Commissioners, no doubt, has a very difficult job ahead of you with many difficult decisions that are going to have to be made. In my opinion, the Township has lived, in my opinion, under no uncertain terms, the Township has lived a lifestyle that they cannot afford. The revenues do not match the level of services that are provided, and this is part of the issue that we have to deal with. The Township has paid for this by ignoring liabilities and have pushed it forward. Unfortunately, now this board and this administration and future boards and administrations will have to deal with this in putting some type of plan together to address these issues, but also to make sure Radnor Township is sustainable for the long term. Many of these decisions of the past will make it difficult now and into the future without real and meaningful change in how the Township operates and how and to what level it provides services. The Township has over $200 million in unfunded liabilities with OPEB that has to be dealt with and planned and begin the process of funding. Just as we didn't get here overnight, we're not going to get out of this overnight, and it's going to take time to be able to address these. We cannot repeat the process of pushing this down the road or waiting for something to occur. We have to do something here and act within the next several years to make sure we maintain the health and sustainability of Radnor Township. This year's budget is what I call a place mark year budget. The proposed tax increase in the 2013 budget being presented tonight is not the way to solvency in addressing our pressing financial and operational issues. Until we size the entire challenge that we have in front of us and understand fully the impact to address the significant liabilities while providing high-quality services and programs to the Radnor community, it's going to take additional time to piece various items together and to plan for the continued viability and long-term sustainability of the townships. This needs to be accomplished during calendar year 2013. Next year also, both union contracts expire, which will also have an impact on the future planning. The question arises as to whether or not a significant tax increase will be coming in the years ahead. And in my opinion, the answer is yes. It's unavoidable. However, this requires an educational component to the community, spelling out exactly what the current situation is in a plan moving forward. But before any increases can be proposed, it must be well planned, thought out, sustainable, implemented, and monitored so that the roadmap can be followed by those who will replace us someday, and for the residents and businesses in Radnor Township to hold us accountable to staying the course. As part of this process over the past several years, I believe the employees have been unfairly targeted in this process. They have worked hard and given a tremendous amount of time and effort to making sure that the level of services provided to Radnor Township have been at a high level. They did not make these decisions and did not award the benefit packages and wages that currently exist today. It will take time and patience to make real change to these contracts, both of these, the rate and the FOP contract. However, it's unfair to hold this against them and that they themselves did not create the problem. Current projects that the Township will continue to work on into 2003 is, I wish it was 2003, we'll probably unwind it, 2013 is the Cressa real estate evaluation of the Township-owned property. At the end of this year, it is hoped that we will actually know what real estate we own. The stormwater utility study should be completed next year, as well as the voluntary contribution for service program. We've spelled out here a plan in which we've proposed to the colleges, the three institutions here, who pay little or no real estate taxes, but who enjoy many of the services that are provided to them. In my opinion, to fairly compensate the Township for these services that they receive, they should pay the same percent that residents pay on their real estate taxes to enjoy these services. Again, those revenues that be received would be responded and returned back to those organizations that provide those services, namely police, fire, and public works. My recommendations to the Board of Commissioners for projects to begin in 2013 is a project that is proposed in the budget for $45,000, which is a consolidation of Township-owned properties and facilities that will look at the combination of moving the Township building, the Radnor Memorial Library, the Wayne Senior Center, and the Recreation Center into one facility. As an example, currently, the Township utilizes only 39% of the space in this building for the $17 million that we invested to build it and furnish it, which again, that's something that we need to look at and address. The comprehensive plan is due for its 10-year update in 2013. $25,000 has been budgeted in the proposed budget. I would request the board to study the feasibility to withdraw from Delaware County and attach to either Chester or Montgomery County. An out-of-region MPO would be the recommended organization to do this study on behalf of Radnor Township. It is something that I think needs to be evaluated for the dollar we spend and the residents in which they pay in their real estate taxes. Are we getting the best value for the dollar spent? I would also like to recommend, if the Board of Commissioners would like to pursue this fact-finding option, would be to utilize the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to complete this study, who I would consider to be a neutral third party to objectively compile the appropriate analysis within the Commonwealth. I would also request that we require RHM to appear before the Township to explain their operations, budget, and billing system. Since the Township pays RHM approximately $3.5 million per year for this service, we should have a fuller understanding of the determination of how these rates are formulated. We require this Delaware County Solid Waste Authority to appear before the Township to explain their operations, budget, and tipping fees. I believe the Township should have a better handle on how this organization works and how they establish these tipping fees. I would also recommend that we require each organization that obtains money from the Township that helps defray their costs of service and operations to detail and explain their budget, fundraising mechanisms, and operational expenses. I would recommend we work more closely with the Radnor Township Memorial Library, since the Township provides their building at no cost, covers all expenses over $500 on repair and maintenance, has relieved them of their building loan, in which the Township has now absorbed that cost of $35,000 per year, as well as providing over $800,000 in financial assistance per year as to how those funds are used. So once again, I would recommend to the Board that we begin the budget process in January of 2013 for the 2014 budget, as well as continuing to address the liability and financial challenges facing the Township. Once this is complete, the 2013 budget is approved by the Board of Commissioners. Performance objectives will be established by department for the 2013 calendar year. The department heads have been working hard on this and have had a draft available in August of this year, which corresponds with their proposed budget. At such time, when the budget is approved, there will be performance objectives that will be released, in which not only the Board of Commissioners can follow, but the community as well, to task and try to make sure that they hit their performance objectives.
Transitioning over to a 10,000-foot view of the budget itself and some of the larger numbers and assumptions that went into the numbers and where they landed at. I'll just take a few moments and step through. As the manager mentioned, the budget itself is a rather lengthy document, approximately 220 pages. What this slide here does is it breaks down what makes up the different different sections of the budget. So from a high level, there's an executive summary, which is intended to, if that's all that you read, if you at least read the executive summary, then you would leave with a pretty good understanding of what's going on in the budget and what some of the larger numbers and issues are. Then that is followed by a forecast summary, which provides forecasted numbers for 2014 through 2018 as they've been updated throughout the budget process based on the meetings that we had throughout 2012. Then you get into the detail section of the budget, where each department has supplied a narrative that explains what that department is responsible for in terms of delivery of programs and services, as well as line item explanations as to the types of things or contracts that are paid for out of the individual line items. And then finally, there's the capital and infrastructure that is included within the capital fund. There's the 5-year capital plan that details out what the capital estimates are for 2013 all the way through 2018. And then finally, at the back end of the budget is some supplemental information and exhibits that provide some additional information and information or data on how we arrived at certain numbers. For example, there's the 1.42% real estate tax increase that is recommended in this budget is tied specifically to the Philadelphia region CPI. That worksheet is in the supplemental information section that ties that out and provides the source of where that information came from. So as we look at the fund totals, I've highlighted 5 funds here, and the funds not listed in this are not listed because A, there's limited or no new budgeted activity for 2013, or because they're budgeted to be self-balancing. An example of each might be, at this point, the investigation fund that the police department has some limited funds that go into and they spend for very specific purposes, has limited to no activity that we're budgeting for in 13. The commemorative shade tree fund has limited to no activity. That's based on when certain circumstances occur, some monies that may have to be paid to the township will be deposited. So at this point, there's no predicted activity for those funds. And at the same time, a fund that is budgeted to be self-balancing is, say, the liquid fuels fund, where we get money from the state as part of the taxes on fueling are shared throughout the state. We turn around and spend those on our road resurfacing and salt purchases. So it's a self-balancing fund or a zero balance fund. With these 5 funds that are highlighted here, obviously the biggest one for the township is the general fund, which houses almost all of the services and programs and all the departments that provide those. It's broken down, an estimated ending 2012 fund balance of $6,510,000. There's an excess 2012 fund balance adjustment line, which corresponds to the resolution that the board passed at the end of last year that dictated any excess balance over 15% would be distributed. As you can see, the $617,000 that would go to the capital fund, that's the only fund up there where part of that distribution would go. The rest would go to the pensions and post-employment benefit fund. So we have a resulting beginning fund balance that we use to determine where our fund balances were going to be for 13. Revenues, expenses, and net transfers are where transfers in and or out, that's just the net number, the sum of the two, and you get to the ending fund balance. So the increase and decrease for each of those funds is shown on the last row. As you can see, for the general fund, there is no increase or decrease. We targeted $0 there. Same with the sewer fund. The capital fund has a negative $933,000. That was, as it was discussed in the capital budget, a fund balance of 1.6, almost 1.7 million going into the year, whereas a more reasonable fund balance might be somewhere in the ballpark of 718,000. So utilizing some of that fund balance to initiate the capital program. That was something that was discussed in CARFAC and different alternatives there as well. The alternative to that plan was detailed in the executive summary, where if the board is not comfortable spending that fund balance down, generating the revenue to transfer the full amount in. And then the Park and Open Space Fund, which is paying off the debt service on the prior $10 million in Park and Open Space bonds. And for 2013, there's enough fund balance to cover how much more the debt service is going to be over the revenues. Some of the larger revenue assumptions going into next year, the real estate tax millage of 1.42% increase, which will generate about $167,000. And I'll note that the real estate tax rate equivalent in the far right column represents the percentage of tax increase that would otherwise be necessary if we do not move forward with any of these revenue options. The business privilege taxes were up considerably for the second year in a row over what we initially budgeted. So going into 13, we took a little bit more aggressive approach on trying to predict where those might end up and took a 3.8 increase over our 2012 forecasted numbers, which is about $850,000 in anticipated additional revenue, which helped to offset the mercantile taxes down by 50% due to the ordinance change, which will be a one-time, as we discussed, a one-time hit on that revenue for 13 only, with the understanding that when we get into 2014, that'll return back to its normal levels. On the fee side, the major changes that are being proposed, sewer rent, as we are proposing that there is no rate change for 13 in the sewer rent. The Delaware County, we're proposing a $36 per home fee to pass through the tipping fees that they impose upon the township for the collection of the solid waste. It's being proposed as a fee primarily because, A, it's not the township's fee. It's not something that this board has made a decision on charging. It is something that was mandated down to us from the county. And the second is to continue to absorb that through the real estate taxes, is asking a large portion of the real estate taxpayers, the businesses, to help offset a cost that is specifically related to residential homes. And those businesses pay separately for the garbage collection, so in essence, they are already paying that fee with whomever's picking up their garbage. The third major change in the fees is proposing a $10 increase to the parking tickets. Currently, we're at $15, going up to $25, and the superintendent will touch on that momentarily. And from a departmental level, right now the township pays 100% of the cost for the school crossing guards. We're proposing to work with the school district and obtain a 50% reimbursement or cost sharing with the school district on that service. At the same time, on the permitting side with community development, recognizing that there are some larger projects coming, is recognizing about $250,000 worth of that income coming in next year to help offset the costs, some additional costs within that department for help on the building code and inspection side. And then on recreation, some additional programming and sponsorship revenues as well. When we take a look at the larger expenditure assumptions, for staffing and payroll, headcounts for all the non-police departments are proposed to stay the same as they are today. With the police department, the 2012 budget assumes 41 officers, when you including the chief or superintendent. So going into 2013, we made the same assumption at 41 officers, even though their actual head count is at 36, due to some retirements that occurred this year. Wage increases of 2.5% for all the employees, with the exception of the township manager, who is at 0% increase. As we discussed back in September, fully funding the MMO, which includes about $1.5 million of additional expenses as a result of the updated actuary numbers. And on the OPEB front is funding it at continuing to fund at pay-as-you-go, plus the budget. The general fund includes a small $100,000 plus or minus additional set aside to the extent that that fund balance is available. Capital and infrastructure, proposing in 2013, funding the 2013 portion with the excess fund balances that were collected in the general fund in 2011 and 12, establishing a long-term funded capital program, specifically getting away from the issuance of long-term bonds to fund short-term capital. And then, as the manager pointed out, adding a $45,000 for a combined facility study. And then on the community organizations and fire company, increasing the funding by 2.5 for all of the organizations. Taking a look at where we ended up on the forecast summaries is, as again, the manager highlighted moments ago, taking a look at that bottom graph. When you look at the modified expenditures by type, the dark colored bar on the top of each of those years represents OPEB, and then you can see the other categories are below, and basically all relate back to the capital plan in one form or another, being infrastructure, facility funding, or capital funding within the departments. So really, when you look out into the future years, the increases over where we are today are forecasted to either fall under the OPEB or the capital side. On the revenue side, as the manager again pointed out, the larger increases, non-real estate tax related increases in those future years are focused, the big one is the voluntary contribution for services program, and we have in there for 15. Again, trying to be conservative on when we think we might have that agreement settled. The result then is taking a look at, and again, referring back to the manager's point about the impact to tax rates to fund obligations as they exist right now, is mathematically calculating it in 2014. You could take a look again. We bracketed off the portion of that tax increase needed for OPEB and what portion of that would be for capital funding. That total percentage is a little over 31%. That's down a little bit from where we talked in August about those forecasted numbers, primarily because of the business privilege tax doing better than predicted, or than we originally thought. And then the bottom graph there represents what the millage rate would be provided with the percentage changes on the graph above. So at this point, we will transition over to the individual departments and have them give a summary of their budget presentations, starting with recreation and community programming.
Good evening, and thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity here tonight to talk about the Recreation and Community Programming Department's budget and our development. We took a very accountable and objective approach towards the development of that budget, looking into 2013, particularly with the service delivery concentrated more towards community events versus just exclusive to programming. The main three components that comprise the budgetary composition within our department's budget. The biggest, of course, is programs, as you see here, representing about 49%. Essentially, that's all of the expenses related there that go towards covering the costs related directly towards programming and events, things like part-time salaries for summer employees, recreation supplies, rentals, contracted services, and things like that related directly to programming. The biggest part about this area of the budget is that the majority of these expenses are not made unless there's revenues that support the other side to sustain those costs in the development of those programs and or events. So PZO Gym is another area there. It takes into consideration all of the related building expenses. We work in tandem with the Public Works Department to go through a lot of those expenses that are made towards the building components. There's also a programming component with contracted services within that area of the budget, similar to programs. The other part there you see in the red. There's program development that happens there and expenses that are made there related to programs that aren't actually made unless there are revenues sustained or captured on the other end to be able to afford those costs. The administration department represents, of course, the three full-time employees and one part-time person that we currently have, as well as a lot of our professional development, fleet expenditures, and office supplies. Looking back from 2012 to 2013, the biggest impact within our budget occurs within that programs area, particularly under the rentals line item. You're going to see about 142% increase right there at that line item, approximately $71,000 up from last year. It will go directly towards the cost of the use of the interior of the facilities with the Radnor School District. As you know, we depend on those heavily for a lot of our major programs, like the Radnor Youth Basketball Program and Radnor Day Camp, as well as some of the others. We also have a new service that we provide to the community for discount tickets to area attractions that makes up the other component to that large impact to that line item. Overall, the impact to that area is about a 16% increase as an aggregate to that area within programs. Within a lot of the other line items that exist there, we actually had considerable decreases. Again, going back to the way we looked at the development of our budget from an objective standpoint, and also transitioning more towards the delivery of our event base to our service, we actually found that we were able to reduce a lot of the items within there. So that helped alleviate a lot of the impact that you'll see within that rentals area. At Sulpizio Gym, we were able to do the same thing. So that 23% reduction that you see there is largely due to efficiencies that we were able to build in as a result of programming and switching a lot of our trends and creating more efficiencies within that and removing some underutilized areas that we felt could come out. A lot of the building expenses within there, of course, stayed very stable. Within the administration department, there's about a 3% increase that accounts for some of the payroll and pension liabilities. Overall, our budget is $906,000. It's a 5.5% increase from 2012 overall. Again, we feel it was a really great accomplishment on our behalf for it to only increase by that much, particularly because of those major increases that took place within that rentals line item that I had mentioned earlier. Revenues make up a large part of the Recreation Department's budget. We're projecting that we're going to intake $766,000 in 2013. You can see the breakdown of those areas here. That's a 7% increase from 2012. Programming fees obviously make up a large portion of the revenues that we take in, as do a lot of the programming fees and rentals that occur at the Radnor Activity Center. We also, in that sponsorships area where you see represented by about 4% of our revenue slice, we're working to increase that, and that's something we'll be monitoring over time. If we're able to achieve those projections to our revenues, we're looking at an 84.6 recovery overall to our department's budget for 2013. Within the programs area, those expenses don't take place, as I had mentioned, without having the revenues on the other side. So that always operates at about 100%, at 100% cost recovery. It's where the additional margin there goes to cover the costs, of course, that we have above and beyond programming fees like those at Radnor Activity Center with the building operating costs, as well as our administration department's portion of time that it puts forth towards programming, as well as the other areas that it concentrates in. So we feel that's a good accomplishment heading into 2013, looking towards that cost coverage ability for our department. As we look into 2013, we want to continue on our path to collaborative delivery in the way we deliver our programs and our events. For instance, we had a major event, of course, that took place just yesterday where we had about 2,000 people in attendance, and we had a lot of community groups that were out there with us, like Mainline School Night and the Art Center, who were able to also increase their outreach ability by having interaction and outreach with those folks that attended those events. So as we move forward in expanding our event base, we want to continue to do that and provide those opportunities for those organizations as well as many businesses within the community. Increasing cost recovery is definitely a primary focus, as well as I had mentioned before, increasing the sponsorship-based revenues that namely go to support our events and some of our programming as well. We want to create and expand the programming traditions that occur here. We saw 6 new events just alone take place in 2012, which expanded our attendance base up about 40% from 2011. We're very thrilled about that, and we're looking forward to continuing on that path, as well as reaching new populations with our programming, filling gaps with programming, and getting more people out to a lot of the things that are happening within the community. We also will assist in the partnership opportunities in the delivery of the operations of our facilities to help them be more sustainable and help to their improvement. As you know, with the Radnor Memorial Turf Field and what that delivered to improvements to that facility, as well as the Willows Mansion, in which we're looking at right now. We also want to continue to creatively utilize the staff within our department to be able to fulfill our goals. We want to continue to serve as a community resource. A lot of folks reach out to us for a variety of things, not just the direct programs and activities that we deliver, but those that other organizations within the community deliver as well. So we'll continue to provide that ability. And overall, expanding and providing abundant quality of life opportunities for the Radnor residents that they've come to enjoy, and definitely something that increases interest in living here in Radnor, a very important part of their quality of lifestyle. So in closing, I just want to take an opportunity, first of all, to thank my staff members. They all had a very collective and direct approach towards helping me with the development of the budget. And so I want to take an opportunity to recognize them. And I also want to thank you, commissioners, for your consideration of our budget that we put forth here tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. As part of presenting Community Development's portion of the proposed 2013 budget, I thought I would discuss a few items that I thought were worthy of highlighting. First, from a staffing standpoint, in 2012, Community Development was allocated 2 additional positions, one being a part-time property maintenance inspector who's been on board for about a month, and a full-time in-house rental housing inspector. After doing a detailed financial analysis, it was determined that through outsourcing this full-time position, we were able to save the department and the township approximately $16,000 a year. We anticipate bringing on that third-party company at the end of this month to fill that position. Moving to 2013, we are proposing to keep the same positions that we had in 2012 with the addition of a part-time administrative assistant to help offset the workload generated from the renewed rental housing inspection program. One of the most significant impacts to Community Development's budget is under Contractual Services. While there are several new budgeted line items under this area, all of the expenses are associated with existing approvals, allocations, and services currently provided by the Township, such as third-party services for rental housing inspections and building code inspections, the magnet software and the maintenance of that software, legal services for Zoning Hearing Board and Rental Housing Appeals Board, as well as property maintenance. When we started developing the 2013 budget, I wanted to focus on a theme of budget management. In essence, that's keeping our expenses less than what was budgeted and looking at surpassing what we were budgeting for our revenue. And while we can do that relatively easily for our expenses on a day-to-day basis, it's much more challenging to do that from a revenue standpoint given the uncertain nature of permit activity. One way of accomplishing that is through additional breakout of budget line items. For example, in previous years, we had one revenue line item for our zoning hearing board applications. However, we have separate fees for residential versus non-residential. By including separate revenue line items for residential versus non-residential, we're able to better track the revenue generated from the applications versus the expenses associated with that. So we're proposing to do that for several of our other boards as well. Earlier, I discussed keeping our revenues and our expenses in check or surpassing our revenues, and this slide clearly shows that we were able to accomplish that in 2012. The blue represents the budgeted amount, and the red represents where we're projecting to end the year. As you can see, our expenses were less than what we had budgeted, and our revenues surpassed what we had budgeted. The green represents what we are projecting for 2013 for each of these items. Under community development and the expense, we have 7 major categories: contractual services, wages, payroll liabilities, and benefits. Combined, that equates to 97% of our budget. The remaining 3% is allocated towards materials and supplies, minor office equipment, employee training and development, and our fleet. Of these 7 categories, we were able to achieve 5 of them being under what was projected from an expense standpoint. And that's contractual services and materials and supplies. And moving into 2013, we're hoping to keep the same trend for all 7, where our expenses are less than what we are budgeting for. As part of our capital request for 2013, we're requesting 2 replacement vehicles to replace 2 of the aging fleet vehicles that are assigned to community development. In summary, while our expenses are higher in 2013 than what we had budgeted in 2012, the revenue projections are more than adequate to make up for that offset. I'd like to thank the commissioners for this opportunity to present the board, and also like to thank my staff for their dedicated work in not only helping me prepare the budget, but for also working day in and day out tirelessly in keeping the expenses in check. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is the Public Works and Engineering Department's portion of the budget, and because of the size and the amount of our accounts, I've done it somewhat differently than my colleagues. What you're going to see is really a compilation of the many planning sessions we had with members of rate, supervisory staff, myself, manager, finance director, and other departments, as well as a portion of the special meetings we held on infrastructure, stormwater, and facilities. So what you're looking at here is the major accounts within Public Works broken down, and that also follows how our divisions of labor also follow. So in the building and grounds account, there was a 14% reduction. Now, this reduction is based on 2013 proposed budget versus 2012 amended budget. And if you look through the 2012 budget, you will see the 2013 budget, you will see individual line items that may have gone up or down. So this is the net at the bottom of the account total. Solid waste down 1.2%, engineering up 12%, highway down 6.7%, mechanics up 2.6%, parks maintenance down 2.3%, the sewer fund up 12%. Solid waste, this is our largest division and our largest expense category. So we have a 1.2% decrease versus the 2012 amended budget. And the use of seasonal employees reduces wages, and there's no impact on OPEB. We do have an increase in maintenance and repair due to our aged fleet. We also have a note here just to bring forth what these costs are. The cost per household for trash, brush, recycling pickup is $374 per household. In 2009, Delaware County Solid Waste Authority started charging the township a tipping fee, which they had not done until that time. As of 2013, that tipping fee will have over doubled. And based on our estimates, that is at a cost of about $240,000. So we have proposed the trash fee at $36 per household to cover the expense of this unfunded mandate. And, what you see here is the major account variations. So building and grounds, there was a decrease of 14.7%. That was because of salaries in 2012. Highway, this is our second biggest division, and this is where the street light, traffic signals, road repair and maintenance, salt, snow plowing, all comes out of this account. And we've had a 6.7% decrease for 2013, and that's due to a reduction in contractual services and supplies. Engineering, the 12% increase is somewhat misleading. Based on the finance director's forecast algorithm, we feel that the reimbursable professional services for next year will be somewhere along the lines of what we have increased for this year. So it's really a pass-through cost. So what we're saying is we feel that we're going to still maintain the same amount of applicants that are coming in. So those reimbursable engineering fees will go up, but obviously the applicant pays us back for them. It is a pass-through cost. The sewer fund shows a 12% increase. This is due most in part to an increase in capital project funding as well as RHM, our funding for the sewage. We're going to look at capital and the long-term needs we have in capital. And as the board's seen through the special meetings, we've done a lot of planning for vehicles and equipment as well as other things. And one of the things we were charged with by the manager and the finance director was how to fund your capital purchases. So we've come forth with lease purchase plans, which will allow us over a 5-year period to spread those payments out, which could possibly, with the board's approval, allow us to purchase multiple items of equipment in a given year at roughly the same rate as buying one new. And of course, there is interest included with the lease purchase plan. The prior lack of planning and regular replacement leaves us with several vehicles and pieces of equipment past their useful life. The board may remember, wasn't long ago, you approved the repair of 4 trash trucks on an emergency basis. You also approved the replacement of 2 dump truck bodies on an emergency basis. That's what we've been left with. We have asked for several items in the capital and vehicle equipment category, but there are really 2 large ones that we are in most dire need of. One is a trash truck and one is a sweeper, and they are both high dollar items. Capital project needs. Again, we've been doing planning on this, but we do have needs in sanitary sewer, although that is the O2 account, not the general fund. Traffic signals, you'll see that in the budget. We have a 15-year plan laid out. Parks facilities, again, that comes from those planning meetings we've had. And in storm sewer, the board authorized AMEC to determine a vehicle for funding our stormwater needs. And they are actually on board and working, and we've sent invitations out to our stakeholder groups, and we've had several of those invitees accept. So what we're looking for here through AMEC is the final piece will be legislation brought forth to this board to charge residents on a flat fee basis for impervious surface to give us a constant funding source for not just operations and maintenance, and I don't mean of small maintenance, but repair or replacement of larger lines, but is also to help us against the flooding issues that we currently have. The summary of impact issues for the Public Works and Engineering Department. We already touched on the aging fleet. Again, we've already spoken of the infrastructure projects, the use of seasonal employees, the stormwater fund being prepared by AMEC. This is huge in, again, the hopes that we will be able to fund in a sustainable fashion the stormwater needs of the township. The Delaware County solid waste fee. Again, this is an unfunded mandate by Delaware County that we are hoping to institute, and we are proposing a flat fee per household of $36 to cover. And the one comment I have up here is, how do we make this all work? And I have to say, we make it work through the Public Works employees. This is a group of people very dedicated, care about what they do, they care about their jobs, and they help not only provide many of the ideas for this budget, they're very cost conscious. We get cost savings ideas from all levels of the Public Works Department. And it's with great thanks to dedicated employees of the Public Works and Engineering Departments that we're able to put this forth, and I would like to give them a great big thank you for their work they do on a day-to-day basis. And we would also like to thank the Board of Commissioners.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'd like to thank you for your time tonight. When I worked on this budget with my staff and we were formulating this, the three main objectives we wanted to keep in mind, first and foremost, was officer safety, then a commitment to the safety of our residents, and of course, a commitment to fiscal responsibility. Two important concepts I'd just like to bring up. One, back in June, as you remember, and you approved it, we reorganized the police department's hierarchy, and through flattening the organization, we actually saved approximately $130,000. In addition to that, I think it's important that we note that no officer has been hired in Radnor Township for 5 years. I'm very proud of my staff and the work that they did in helping me with this. As you can see, police salaries by unit in the overall budget. Patrol obviously takes up the bulk of our expenditures. The investigations are a smaller percentage. Currently, we do have one detective in the investigations unit. We do have 2 officers assigned to the traffic safety unit, and the bulk of that is made up through administration. Regarding budget variations, as Mr. White stated earlier, the anticipated budget is for 40 officers plus 1 police superintendent. That would account for the salary increase overall. As a result, we are looking at a decrease in overtime with the addition or advent of 5 additional officers. Another thing Mr. White mentioned was the increase in parking tickets, and I will get to that in a second. What we are proposing is to hire 2 part-time meter enforcement officers. As it states right now, with the tickets being $15, if we raise the fee to $25, a meter enforcement officer part-time, if they write 1 ticket per hour, we are seeing a net profit. And as far as the longevity, that is something that's contractual for my officers. Regarding budget variations, we have $15,000 allocated to professional development. That is all the training that my officers are responsible for attending. Included in the professional development is, as you can see to the right, Northwestern Staff and Command. That is supervisory training for 2 of my sergeants that I would propose that they would attend. The importance about training in police work is it not only improves productivity and morale, it also decreases liabilities, and that's why it's a necessity to have that expenditure. Also included in professional development, every year our officers are responsible for maintaining their certification through the state of Pennsylvania. That is included in that figure as well. Office supplies, we are looking at a little over $10,000. Emergency management, that is something that is a new line item added by the township manager to make sure we are NIMS required. Everybody remembers when we had Hurricane Irene with our emergency management preparedness, we have $18,999 that was added to that budget. As far as operating supplies, we're looking at $42,600. That is a decrease. Ammo purchase is one of the decreases, as you could see. I remember Commissioner Schaefer mentioned when we had the new weapons, if the old ammunition was able to be used in those guns, and the answer is yes, it was. As far as budget variations to continue here, as we know, we are in the midst of getting ready to have a culling done in Radnor Township, first time in Radnor Township's history, and that accounts for the USDA's culling program of an amount of $50,000. Communications, we have $17,500 earmarked for that. That will include the maintenance of our radio system as well as phones. And the uniforms, we have $80,000 budgeted. That not only includes the 35 in 1, but also an additional 5 officers if they are hired. And I'd also like to point out, we did not replace our bicycle uniforms for approximately 10 years, and that is included in that amount as well. Contractual services, there is an increase with an overall cost of $43,000, and we do anticipate a decrease in legal services at the amount of $16,000, and I would attribute that with the increase that we are doing for our training of our officers. Again, to mention revenue enhancement, to touch upon the meter violations, currently we are at $15. Mr. White asked me something which was very important about a week ago. What are the other municipalities charging as far as parking tickets? And we were the lowest in the surrounding area. The increased handicapped parking, currently it's $50 if someone parks in a handicapped parking space. And to give you some point of reference, if you park in a handicapped spot in a city like Philadelphia, they charge $300. So we're anticipating $150 for handicap parking. And we're also looking at the possibility of advertising on our parking kiosks, which would generate approximately $2,500 per year. Increasing that, currently, if someone trips an alarm, a fire alarm or a burglar alarm, which we call it a false alarm, the first one is free. After that, the second and subsequent violations are approximately $50. We're recommending that those fees go up to $70 for the second violation and $140 for third and subsequent violations after that. The $175,000, I would say, is a modest estimate of what 2 additional part-time meter enforcement officers would generate, especially if we increase the ticket prices to $25. And the advantage of the part-time meter enforcement officers is they are part-time and there are no OPEB benefits associated with those hirees. As far as our capital budget variations, in the capital, we are looking at 6 new vehicles, 3 for patrol, 2 for detectives. One of those vehicles will be shared with Ms. Cohen's staff, and one specialized trailer for the traffic unit because the one we have outlived its shelf life. The video system for $9,000 in our capital. That is something currently right now, when we get surveillance video from different businesses in the area, some of them are encrypted where we don't have the capabilities of viewing that surveillance video, and many times we're not able to view it or we have to utilize the news media in order to encrypt it for us. That's the reason for that $9,000 video system that we're proposing. As far as the command laptops for the 2 supervisory vehicles, this is something that would go into the back of the vehicle along with their command station that would enhance communications at crime scenes, fire scenes, and things like that. The ballistic vests, if you know anything about the makeup of the ballistic vests, they're obviously made out of Kevlar, and Kevlar has a shelf life. Currently, the state does provide a grant, and we match that. We're responsible for 50% of the expense of the ballistic vests. Airsoft training, also known as munitions training, is something that enables our officers to train for Columbine-type incidents. It's the best way I could describe it. That gets them out of a pistol range and puts them in active shooter situations. And the earpieces is something, and the township manager was good enough to allow us to add this into our capital budget. Currently, right now, if our officers are on any type of a major fire or major auto accident scene, they're unable to hear each other or communicate with Delcom, and that's the reason for the purchase of these earpieces at a cost of $12,000. The in-car cameras, currently we have 5 in-car video cameras, and if you watch any of these reality TV shows, you see the value of having these in-car cameras, not only for their evidentiary value, but also for their training purposes and to enhance officer safety. By getting 5 additional units, we'll be able to make sure that all of our patrol vehicles are equipped with these in-car cameras. And of course, a plastic prisoner safety seat at the cost of $3,200, and that's self-explanatory. It not only secures a prisoner better, it prohibits the prisoner from dumping contraband inside of a police car. And in closing, I would like to thank you again, Commissioners, for listening to me and also for taking this into consideration. But I'd also like to thank my staff. They were invaluable in assisting me with this budget presentation, and especially Sergeant George Smith, Lieutenant Chris Flanagan, and Corporal Kevin Gallagher. And again, I thank you for your time.
Okay, the last department, finance. It's always tough going after the groups of folks that really do an excellent job at making sure that they're on the front lines of delivering programs and services. So we'll wrap up with the finance department, who we serve as the back office that helps collect the revenue and make sure from an HR and compliance standpoint we're doing what we need to do. The finance department, this pie chart breaks out the different areas that we work on a daily basis. I've highlighted the 3 biggest pieces of those pie, which represent the financial auditing and reporting piece, the human resources piece, and the Act 511 tax administration piece. Just real briefly, when you take a look at the finance department budget going into next year, it's roughly 3% higher than what we're forecasted to end this year and 5% lower than the amended budget. The 3% increase represents the 2.5% represents the wage increases that are proposed. Highlighting on the HR point is that's something that the board has recognized with the reorganization from last summer as a need for the township. And I touched on this morning when we met with the entire staff and reviewed the budget. But when we take a look at some of the things that the full-time HR person has done just in the short time that she's been in that role with the assistance of the contracted employee up until the spring of this year, making sure that we are doing constant census and audit work, making sure, and in doing so, we've eliminated paying for health care benefits to retirees that had passed away, making sure that that divot is charging us the correct amount for the health care costs for retirees that are Medicare eligible. So instead of paying full price for a health care plan for someone who's on Medicare, just paying for the supplemental insurance cost. They have the work that that employee has done with the assistance of Allison up until the spring and then Bob Tate since has generated enough cost savings to fund those positions. And not just this year. The savings are perpetual every year. So there's not a whole lot of departments that can make that argument, but those folks, through the work that they have done, have been able to achieve that. Taking a look at the Act 511 tax administration, focusing on that is making sure that we're allocating enough resources to generate that or to collect that revenue. Albeit we don't have a whole lot of control over the revenue itself, but for the aspects that we do have control over, and that is compliance, we want to make sure we have enough resources allocated to do our job in making sure that the taxpayers are compliant. To that end, as part of the mercantile tax change, one of the primary benefits of making that change to a calendar year is it's going to enhance our ability to go in and audit more efficiently, because the federal schedules will match up with the schedules that are required with our tax forms instead of having to marry mid-year financial reports together to try to figure out the numbers. So taking a look at our contractual services, which outside of payroll is our biggest expense going into next year, it's about $36,000 less versus what we are forecasted to end at this year, with the primary changes being the loss of the part-time HR assistants, which at the time that person left, we elected to not refill that and instead divide those responsibilities up between the assistant finance director and the full-time HR coordinator. At the same time, with the loss of the previous assistant township manager, we needed help to do the 2011 audit and CAFR assistance. Moving forward, now that we have Mr. Tate as the assistant finance director, those expenses won't be necessary. And then moving forward, as we've discussed and the board approved earlier this year, is entering an agreement with ADP for the payroll services. So far, we've gone live on the retiree payroll. Our anticipated go-live date for the active employees is January 1st. Taking a look at our professional services, basically this captures the costs that we incur annually for the audit and the compilation of the comprehensive annual financial report. As you can see, there's very little change there, plus 3% or about $1,600. And with the actuary and bond counsel for 2012, we incurred some additional expense there in conjunction with the work that CARFAC and the administration worked on in developing the pension and OPEB report. The last piece for the finance department is the Act 511 services. We incur approximately we're budgeted to incur about $169,000 next year in legal and auditing services, which is consistent with prior years. But the one important note that we'd like to make here is that in each of the subsequent years, the direct revenues from those audits have always exceeded the amount we spend. We anticipate that trend to continue to occur. And the important part about that, too, is those revenue bars on that graph at the bottom just represent the amount of the settlements at the time the audit is closed. It does not capture the income from the businesses complying with the tax laws in future years. So there is more revenue on top of that is not represented in those charts. The other area that the Finance Department oversees is information technology. The graph on the top represents the department total expenses over the last 3 years. As you can see, there was a drop from 11 to 12 That corresponded with the reorganization that the board approved last summer with the reassignment of one of those staff members from IT into finance to help with the contracts, the bidding, and grant compliance. But overall, the expenses are remaining relatively the same. This department is made up of 2 full-time individuals and then some very, very insignificant time from a third part-time employee who works approximately 8 to 10 hours a week as needed to assist with the police department information technology. The primary expenses in that department are payroll and related expenses. By far, that's the biggest. The second and second significant piece is the contractual services. Taking a look at what makes up that budget going into next year, some of the larger items are the Code Red emergency contract, the eGov strategies, which hosts our website, as well as our copiers, the plotter scanner, the Laserfiche, with the other big item being the Mitel leasing, which is our phone system. As the other departments have done, I too would like to take the opportunity to thank especially the members of the finance department. They do a terrific job on a daily basis, making sure that the financial accounting transactions are occurring timely and accurately. Their professionalism and flexibility impresses me every single day, and given the heightened scrutiny that they fall under with regard to dealing with money on a daily basis, the way they are able to step up, solve problems, and roll with the constant changes is always impressive, and they deserve a great deal of thanks for the work that they do every day. As the manager pointed out earlier, it should not be understated the value that CARFAC has brought to our ability to put information together, to look at things before it comes to the board, and for insight and input on different areas. So they too should be thanked as part of this process. The elected treasurer we work very cooperatively with that person in making sure that the real estate taxes are collected and accounted for properly, as well as daily deposits, signing of checks, and those types of things. And we appreciate his cooperation in working with us. At the same time, working with the manager and the other department heads, it's on a daily basis always a pleasure to work with these folks. They're very professional, and they are all dedicated toward making sure that at the end of the day we're providing the very best programs and services to the Radnor citizens. And as a citizen, I definitely appreciate that. But these are a tremendous group of individuals, and I enjoy working with them and thank them for the last month and a half of fun that went into putting this together. And then finally, but not least, I'd like to thank the Board of Commissioners as well for the opportunity to serve, as well as your time that you put in throughout 2012 with all the special meetings and as we proceed through all the public hearings and the ultimate adoption. So thank you to you two for your time.
Well, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate all the work that you put into this budget. And now I'll ask if there's any commissioner comments, questions.
Well, I'll start off by just saying that I want to recognize and acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that went into this by all of the departments. It's really it's easy to go through this budget and get your questions answered before because there's so much detail in the section preceding the actual budget. It's very evident how much time and effort each department put into putting these numbers together. And I just learned tonight that Bill White actually even has a special fancy schmancy algorithm that you used, which is very impressive.
I learned that tonight too.
But sincerely, thank you for all I know how many hours you all have put into this, and it's probably been quite stressful given our numbers. So thank you from me and from this whole board. I do want to point out that you'll see, and as we discussed tonight, there's a 1.4-ish% tax increase. And that you have to look at with the backdrop and knowledge that that's a 1.4% increase in face of 2.5% mandatory increases according to our contracts for all of our payroll, a 45% increase in what we've had to pay for pension payments, a 7.4% increase in health benefits, and the pay-as-you-go payments that we're making for our OPEB. We haven't technically funded this year in the 2013 budget the OPEB fund, but there are significant expenses in the pay-as-you-go aspect of that. So the fact that the 1.4% that we have gotten the increase down to 1.4%, I took a lot of cutting and trimming and moving mountains, and so I want to recognize that as well. I also want to point out that that's 1.4% of your township tax. So, which I like to always remind people, your total tax burden is mostly not township. So 1.4% of your township tax for 54% of our residents, that's going to be $9 next year, your tax increase. For 90% of our residents, 90% of our tax-paying residents, it will be under $20 increase. So it's on a smaller chunk of your tax bill, so it's not quite as big as it might seem. As far as my detailed questions about the budget, I'm going to hold off on those. We just got this budget. Everyone has just gotten this budget, and we have several public hearings to discuss it. So I do have a lot of detail to discuss about this budget. I think it'd be more appropriate to do that at our first public hearing. So I'm going to hold off on those. But again, thank you. Great job. Thank you to every single department head who put this together. Really, it shows how much work you did.
Any other commissioner?
Bill or Bob, I have a couple of questions on the revenue line. And I guess first I'd like to echo Elaine's comments. This is a very robust document. I also appreciate all the effort you guys have done and put into this to move the process forward so we can have the necessary discussions and have informed conversations. What I'm not entirely comfortable with, and I'm not saying I'm uncomfortable, but it's just having a short period of time to review it. The business privilege tax has never been as high as it has been until this year, and then we're proposing an increase, or forecasting an increase, excuse me, for next year. Can you give me a little bit of a flavor as to why we think that's sustainable and this year wasn't an aberration?
Well, looking back from 10 to 11 into 12, that particular line item has shown consistent growth year over year, albeit the percentage growth has shrunk in each of the years, which we kept that trend again going into next year, showing a smaller growth than it has done even from 11 and 12. And honestly, the other part of the conversation that we had was going in with a more conservative estimate, which obviously would make me feel a lot better about where we end up. But at the end of the day, come the end of May of next year, if we learn that the revenues really did come in again much, much higher than anticipated, the argument that we're being overly conservative on those revenue estimates, which on the real estate tax side would drive up the percentage increase needed on the real estate tax side. So the argument of being overly conservative on non-tax revenues, non-real estate tax revenues to drive up the real estate tax. So the relationship between the two revenue sources went into the conversation as well.
I guess my next question would probably be best answered if you flip to page 99 in some of these items. Just again, so I have a bit of a flavor of understanding how much risk we have in the revenue line. The incremental police fines, I know Bill walked us through that. Are we very confident that we're going to get a 40% increase on that revenue item? Basically the second line on page 99, the second line down, the one.
The 190,000?
If you add the 190 to the take as a percent increase of the 457 above it, which is kind of what you kept flat.
Right.
It's a 40% increase, which seems rather steep. to me. And again, it's what I'm concerned about is the cumulative effect of all these pieces. It's, you know, one here, one there, it would be okay. But when you start getting a little bit, assertive and aggressive on your revenue assumptions, they start building on each other. And I know we have the fund balance as protection, but I also just want to make sure we're being prudent in our thinking.
Yeah, on the 190,000, I think based on what the chief stepped through during his presentation is as long as if the trends on folks parking continues to stay the same, that with the added help from the 2 part-time meter enforcement folks, that we should definitely hit the 175 estimate as part of that.
Is that a function? That's more than just. That's more than just the increase in the fines, isn't it? Bill and Bill, it's also an assumption of an increase in the number of citations.
Well, Commissioner, you know, just roughly estimating, if you have say a part-time meter person who writes 30 tickets a day at $25, and you multiply that by, say, 200 days, that's over $150,000 right there. A year, for a year.
So we're confident that people are violating the time on the parking meters to that extent?
We had a part-time meter person that would write close to 100 tickets a day.
All right. Are we confident in the contribution from the school district for the crossing guards?
Yes.
How about the significant increase in revenue from Sulpizio Gym relative to the history?
Yes, I'm confident in that. I think that was a good estimate, a conservative estimate.
And this item that disappeared, federal medical subsidy that we've got in 2011 and are forecasting another $65,000 in 2012. There's nothing there for 2013, and I don't recall what that was all about.
Yeah, when we received the money back in 2011, and forgive me, I don't have the exact details on why we got the money in the first place, but I made a note in the budget file that we were specifically told that that was a one-time revenue. So we were a little surprised to get it again in 12. So,
all right, you're being prudently cautious, and you've convinced me on that one. If I drew my line right, this item identified a couple lines above that premium payments of $125,000 for next year versus where we've been historically. Help me understand that one.
Yeah, the more relevant comparison there is the forecast for 12 and the budget for 13, and that represents the employees' contribution to offset health care. So the percentage is going up as well as the cost of health care.
Thank you.
Else?
Yeah, I have a couple. First, I recognize that our costs have gone up, so I see the need for, like what you have here is very defensible. So thank you for that. It should be on the order of CPI or something close to it, which you've done. I do think we should not have sort of big ticket items until we get more clarity on our situation with our contracts. So, I voiced my concern before about the stormwater initiatives, but I still think that's a mistake until we get more clarity on the contracts. I do think we're paying down our obligations to some degree, not paying them in full, but we are making payments from our fund balance, so I think that's satisfied in my opinion. Some things that concern me: one, I'm not comfortable with the parking fine increase. I think it's going to be problematic for the small mom and pop. People are going to be troubled who, if you're going for a $150 dinner and you get a ticket, that's one thing. But if you're going for a $4 cup of coffee and you get a $25 fine, that's another. So I'm troubled by that, and I'd ask us to move away from that. I also think we need to give thought to, Bob, you explained the rationale for putting the 40 officers in there plus one, but what's the timing of that? Do we have 40 officers as if they started on January 1st?
That's correct.
So what I think we should do is give thought to the timing. It has to be realistic, because if we're not going to start these officers January 1st, which I don't think there's any chance that's going to happen, what that line item becomes is a large overcollection of taxpayer money that is problematic. So when we did the same thing last year, where originally you had a line item, I don't remember which labor it was, but you recognized that it was going to be months before it occurred, and it reduced the amount by $100,000 plus or minus. I know it's only $2,500, but I'm generally unfavorable to advertising on kiosks. I'll entertain that if I see more of it, but that's not something that I'm terribly not gravitating toward that. Okay, and for me, that's the extent of my comments at this point.
Sure, if I can just respond to Don, a couple of questions there. The one is in regards to the parking tickets. To avoid that, you just have to add a quarter in. So I know sometimes people run short of that. So, I mean, that's an option there of, I know we hear a lot of that, and I know the superintendent's department too, is by adding an extra quarter in, they can avoid a lot of that. But I do understand your concern in regards to the increase there. We included 40 officers into the budget, 40 plus one, with the fact that we are currently attempting negotiations with the FOP for new terms and conditions for new hires. The hope would be that we may come to some agreement. We have a lateral list that's ready to go, 5 officers off of that list, as well as, I believe at the end of this month, we'll have the civil service list ready to go. So I think the township has showed good faith that we are in a position to hire officers if we can come to new terms and conditions with a new agreement. But also, though, I think by what the board had put in place for the last 2 years, in which we will propose to the board again, that any excess dollars that remain in the budget, that those are earmarked and tied to going to pay for these liabilities that the township has. So there's a safeguard that falls within there, I believe, that in case we do not bring those officers on, there's a safeguard that that money will not be moved or sent somewhere else, that would fall within those excess revenues that could go to help fund some or offset these expenses that we have with these big liabilities. So it's just some of the thought process we looked at as
Except
part of
that we did bypass that safeguard by $500,000 in 2012. So by budget amendments. So all we have to do to circumvent that safeguard is pass a budget amendment. So it's problematic to collect the money. We shouldn't collect it unless we have a realistic expectation of using it.
Is that with the new tax dollars?
Pardon?
Is that with new tax dollars you're referring to?
I don't understand the nature of your question.
No, you had mentioned that we shouldn't collect the dollars is that new tax dollars that we'd be looking at, the 1.4%, 1.42% increase, if we don't know we're going to hire those folks? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think I understand your question. I believe the answer is yes, that we need to have a realistic expectation of hiring before we commit to raising taxes to generate that revenue.
Right. But even at that, we have over $200 million of liabilities at 1.42% is minimal. I think, Commissioner Schaefer spoke, you're in a range of $9 to $16 based on the value of your home, which really, when you're looking at such huge liabilities and capital equipment funding, it seems minimal, but I do understand your concern with budgeting for those. But also, I think it shows good faith on behalf of the township is trying to bargain a new agreement which would make some significant changes to new hires that would impact the long-term OPEB contributions. And I think what the CARFAC report has done is spelled that out tremendously, of really those terms that have to change. And without going any further into an unfair labor practice, I kind of wrap it at that end there. But I do appreciate your concern, Don, and your comments.
Commissioner?
Just to say that I want to thank you all for the hard work. This is a really incredible budget. I actually was anticipating a 5 or 6% increase myself based on the big expenses we've incurred and we will be incurring, especially with insurance increases and such. So towards that end, the citizens owe you a real debt of gratitude that you're able to control it to this level. And thanks again.
Well, similar comments to the other commissioners, but personally thank Tammy Cohen, Kevin, Steve, Bill Colorillo, and Bill White for all the hard work that you've put into this. 5 years ago when I came on the board, I would spend a good week working on spreadsheets to confirm, the budget and the projections and the assumptions. And I think someone at the time said I was crazy, for doing that. I said, well, at the time we weren't getting everything we needed. Now we are getting all that, so I want to thank all of you for doing that work. It really does mean a lot. And most importantly, on the long-term forecasting, because I think 5 years ago, some of us said, boy, we're headed for some big tax increases in the future, but administration was saying, no, we're not. But here we are, we're looking at the real liabilities, the $214 million in OPEB, the $22 million on the pension, and the true cost of maintaining the capital infrastructure of the township, the stormwater. We have lots of liabilities, and the boards we can't make good, informed, educated decisions if we don't have all that information. So thank you again to all of you for being honest, truthful, and putting in all the hard work to get us the real numbers so we can make good decisions. So thank you again. I support the tax increase, no question. Agree with what Commissioner Nagel had said, that I was in fact expecting a much bigger tax increase, so if we're able to do this at a lower tax increase, I appreciate that. Also echo Commissioner Schaefer's comments that the residents keep in mind that the township tax bill is the smallest of the three, and yet the township provides a good amount of the quality of life services that we receive. So in my opinion, incredible value, incredible return on the dollar. So, I generally don't get complaints for the tax increases we've had. We want to be mindful of spending. We want to do the best we can, keep the spending in check, and spend the money wisely. I think you're all doing a great job at that right now, so I appreciate it. In general, I support everything I'm seeing. I appreciate the document. It's wonderful. I am using electronically. It's on the web if anyone at home would like to see that. I have a hard time reading the spreadsheets when they're real compressed, but reading it on electronic form helps. The assumptions that are used all seem reasonable to me on the expense side, and the assumptions on the revenue side also seem reasonable. So I'm in support of the numbers and the strategy behind all that. The only thing I'm hoping that we are fully funding the true capital expenses that we have. My biggest concerns have always been with the streets, the sewers, the sanitary sewer system, and making sure that we're maintaining those systems. And I think we are doing a good job of that. But, Steve, in particular, since you're kind of new in the township with this issue, don't be afraid to ask for funding when it comes to the capital equipment, the trucks, the streets, the repair and maintenance of the sewers. You won't offend us. If it needs to be fixed, it needs to be fixed. If it needs to be replaced, it needs to be replaced. I do look forward to seeing the new housing inspector, or the rental housing inspector. I do look forward to seeing those the compliance issues dealt with new resources there. I'm glad we're able to do this with part-time hires. So, Kevin, thank you for that. And I guess, Tammy, again, recovering 86% of the fees for all the services that your department provides, wonderful. I don't think many organizations could do better than that. 15% cost of administration on all those services is phenomenal. So thank you for that work. So,
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So again, Bill White, I think Bill's been spending a lot more time than his workday on this kind of stuff. If others don't know this, the accounting system that we have does not generate this 200-page book. Staff takes some of that financial data, recasts it using spreadsheets, Excel, Word documents, and whatnot, and reconstructs it in a way that we can read it. Thank you for all your hard work in doing that. Bob, thank you for giving guidance, direction, and leadership to make all this work for us. I came on the board 5 years ago, became a very tumultuous time. Things were not going well. Expenses were hidden in many ways. reality was hidden in many ways, and we're seeing a lot of clarity. So thank you for leading this process, and I look forward to going through the budget line by line, just getting a full understanding of what you guys have put together and reading it again, the document itself. So thank you. That's my comment.
Well, I'd like to maybe address this to our audience, our taxpayers, our residents, and make sure they understand what a really talented set of managers we have, starting with Bob Zinkowski, our township manager, and all the people that work under him. It really was driven home to me how capable you all are when I sat and watched you and listened to you all just go through each one of your programs and your budgets, your dollars. You had such a great command of what goes on in your departments. And Bill White especially, we're all, at least I'm impressed by your grasp of all the issues related to running this township. And I'm sure you get a lot of that from Bob, and rubs off from Bob. So thank you. And I think it's probably premature to talk about issues, but on page 11, Bob, you do make a recommendation to us that we go with the minimal tax increase and avoid anything greater than the, what is it, 1.42, which is the consumer price index. But did you consider at all perhaps a blend in order to take care of this horrible OPEB liability that it's facing us? And I realize our liability there is not all due next week or this coming January or January of 2014. But did you consider a blend of option A? You come up with the recommendation of option A, which is to utilize the $1,548,000 from the general fund balance, a blend of that and a tax increase greater than the 1.42 that you noted is appropriate.
No, we did, Commissioner. We kind of took a look at that, but also I think we had looked at long-term, again, with a lot of different pieces that are still moving. Some of the recommendations and the conversation we had with CARFAC too, as well as there's so many moving pieces right now. Until we truly have our arms wrapped around what the issues are and how we look to put a long-term plan in effect, we thought this one would be very good as a place mark year budget, especially since we have contracts coming up next year, both of those, which will have a major impact upon how we look at that plan. So that's why we thought this year would be this place mark year budget. But exactly what you spoke about, we did consider that, and that was even some of the comments from some of our staff too as well, looking to do that.
So maybe 1 year from now we'll be in a better position to understand that.
I would think within either the proposed next 2014 year budget or 2015 would be when we would look to do those.
Okay. And just again, I'll repeat, the staff is they're all so capable. They respond to my request, and I'm sure the other commissioners' request, so promptly, and in particular Steve Norsini. I don't know how you do it. You have so many things going on, and on top of what you have going on, we have these periodic emergencies involving stormwater and flooding. Yet you seem to be on top of that and other things as well. So thank you all.
I know I said I was going to hold off on my detailed questions until, and this isn't really a detailed question, this is more of a global question. And in thinking about the OPEB payments, along the lines of what Jim just brought up of, could we just start to blend and pay for some of them now, or start that up? And when I was reading the 5-year forecast that was set forth in here, in the 5-year forecast we have 2014, 2015, 2016 and on, about $3 million a year set for those payments, capital and OPEB together. And I'm curious, is that payment, are the payments that we make out of our, for instance, last year we paid $3 million of excess and we moved it over to OPEB payments and capital payments. This year, it'll be about, we're anticipating it'll be about $2 million. When we think about the forecast of the next 5 years, making those payments, is that over and above the excess reallocating policy, or would would those reallocated dollars be counted towards those payments? Does that make sense?
I thought I understood to the last part.
Are they two separate things?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
For the forecasted piece of this, we're assuming that there are no excesses.
So it's even
So,
budget?
yeah,
and it has
it's,
to all come from somewhere else?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So in the case that we did continue to have $3 million, $2 million excess, that would just supplement it, or would that offset it?
Well, ultimately, that will be a board decision.
Uh-huh.
But it
Okay,
could
and
do
and
either
that
or.
$3 million, that wasn't the ARC payment that's short of the ARC payment that CARFAC figured out.
Yes.
Yes.
That is the increment over the pay-as-you-go number that is included in the budget.
Oh, so if you took the pay-as-you-go number and that would have come to the ARC?
That would, yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, great, thank you.
Steve, you mentioned a 12% increase in the sewer budget, but we're not increasing the sewer rent
It's correct, Commissioner Spengler.
because we have excess?
Yeah, if I could. Part of the,
Because I thought water usage was down.
yeah, water usage was down, which we took a hit in revenue this year. Based on information from Aqua, they expect that to come back up next year. Plus, part of what's driving that percentage up so high was the decrease in budget for this year. So next year is really getting us back to where we thought we would be this year.
And the other thing is that I am not going to vote, and I thought the board ought to consider not voting for a $36 trash fee. I mean, that's another fee that you come up with, a bill that the residents get. I think it should be paid in their taxes. And if we raise the taxes another 1.4%, then the average taxpayer, then instead of everybody paying $36, the $9 person would be paying $7 or $8 because they can deduct it on their income tax, and the $20 person would be paying, $17 or $16. So it doesn't seem to me that we should set up another fee that's just going to be increasing every time the county does something. We know what the county did, and we're going to have discussions with them, and they continue, if it continues to grow, I think we should pay that out of our taxes, and I think we can explain it. I can explain it to my residents without them getting another bill every year for $36 that could be $40 2 years from now, and then $50, then $150, and just start another fee which is not deductible on their income tax, just like the sewer bill is not deductible. So I will not be voting for that $36 fee, and I'd like all my commissioners to think about that in the next, in the coming month.
So, Bill, what percent of the property tax revenue comes from, and if you don't have this, you can send it to me, from residences versus the commercial properties?
1/3.
No, that's not my question.
What?
The property taxes. Because I think Bob, while I was tending towards your direction previously, I think Bob made a very reasonable argument that the commercial property owners who own property, who pay property taxes, already pay a fee to somebody else. And they are essentially subsidizing each of us as a resident, and I'd just like to understand how the magnitude of that.
If you don't mind, Commissioner, let me get that and get that back to you. They do, the businesses do pay a considerable amount of the real estate taxes that we receive, so they are part of that revenue.
But also maybe just to add to that, is what, Kevin, you're spelling out too, is you're going to hit businesses, again, a second time for something that they don't participate in, they don't use because they're already paying for it, so that's a double hit to them. But also, too, you're going to have some homeowners that their property values are much higher will actually pay more than $36. So it's really disproportionate of how this is going to be laid across. But at some point in time, you've got to daylight this issue that people keep reaching into the township's pocket from the federal, from the state, and from the county level. And at some point, you've got to daylight this, that this is nothing that was created by the township, nothing by the board. This is, broken down by each of the homes that use this. So, and it's probably the fairest and most balanced way to separate this out. And for the difference of someone using on their federal taxes, I mean, for the difference of an extra $10 deduction, if that, at the high end, to deduct $36, again, I think we're setting a wrong precedent to hitting other people who have no real stake in this of paying for this particular, actually
Bill,
double hitting.
I have a question. I just realized, do we have the ability to differentiate by parcel type? So, Bill, is that something we know yet?
Are you talking about charging different parcel types at different millage rate?
Yeah, not millage rate, but even the fee per se. So when we mail out the real estate tax bills to all the residents, assuming we're going to collect the fee on the same billing statement, or even if we don't, do we have the way to differentiate and only mail those bills or those fee charges out to the residential real estate owners versus commercial? And if so, why can't we just apply a different tax rate? I don't know if it's legal, but fee versus tax. Well, I don't know.
Well, all I can say is that your residents are not going to happy getting another bill. So
I agree.
They're not going to be happy getting another $36 bill. So you ought to think long and hard about this. I've been around a long time, and it's a lot easier to go 1.4 than hit everybody with a $36 bill.
They're not going to be happy with another bill. I totally agree with you on that bill, and I understand your argument about, for smaller properties, it's going to be less of a burden if you associate it with our tax. However, this fee, I mean, it just makes me stinking mad. I mean, that is a county service. That is why we pay 17% of our tax bill to the county. That is one of the services that our county is responsible for providing, disposal of our trash. We collect it, we pay for that, we transport it, we pay for that. The county's responsibility is disposal. So putting this fee and hiding it in our tax base just isn't right. And I feel like residents need to understand that, and we should have discussions with the county. We should not be paying for this tipping fee.
Well, I mean, there's no law that says the county has to dispose of your trash. I was a county commissioner for 8 years, and we had 3 incinerators, and we closed them. They have landfills, and they have expenses also, and they've made this decision, as we've made decision with the school district not to cut the grass anymore, so they could highlight that in their budget. The fact is, we're all in this together. Federal government, county government, local government, we're all in it together. So highlighting this so we can say to our taxpayers, oh, look, this bill, that's not ours, that's because the county, now charges us for disposing of your trash. I mean, we're all in this together, and I just think it's silly to put it out there because you're daylighting it, and I think it should be included in taxes. But that's my opinion. I'm not voting for it. You guys make your own decision. I don't think we have to debate it any longer. I just, Bob, one other thing is, knock yourself out trying to leave Delaware County and go to Montgomery County and Chester County. It's not happening in my lifetime. If you want to spend effort on that, I think it's wasted effort. I don't understand what that's about, but that's my opinion.
If you knew me long enough, I love a challenge.
Yeah, well.
And the whole thing is if it comes out to be where it's cheaper to go to a county, do I have your commitment that we move?
No.
We vote to move?
No, I'm not voting to move out of Delaware County, okay? Stop. That's just wasting everybody's time. But that's my opinion.
Well,
which I'm entitled
I would
to.
support-
Public
I would
comment.
support
Public
it.
comment.
Bill, I have one last. Steve, is the tipping fee simply for the trash, or is it for the trash and recycling?
No, it is solely for the trash, solely for what is picked up on Mondays and Tuesdays throughout the township.
All right, well, without getting real complicated, could a resident help himself or herself by improving the recyclable component of what leaves their household and thereby earning a credit against this $37?
What we have spoke of in the past, Commissioner, was absolutely the more we recycle, the better off Radnor Township is. We pay less in these tipping fees, right, because we've reduced the tonnage, and in most cases we get paid for our recycling, so we would increase the revenue from a recycling. So that would be a bonus on a township-wide basis. As far as, I think in the future, the whole thought would be that is if we can increase recycling to some significant level where it could be measured, then perhaps there could be a type of credit.
It would be a challenge to administer such a program, but
Perhaps not on a house-by-house basis, but on the houses as an aggregate, the residents as an aggregate.
All right, public comment?
Hello, Dan Webster, 242 Ravenscliff. As a member of the public, I would like to express my gratitude to the board for allowing this team to do what they've done over the past year, which I think is just an incredible amount of work and an incredible increase in the knowledge that you all have, and especially that the public all has. The level of transparency in this report that you've put together for this budget is just beyond compare. I've been working, and not to cast stones here, but I've been working trying to understand the school district budget, and that's 5-6 times what we pay in township taxes. And I'm going to be sending this over to them, Bill and Bob, so they can see how clear all this is in trying to understand the township finances. So thank you, and I'm sure that I don't know how much everybody else does, but I'm sure this all comes down from the top. So thank you, everybody. When Mr. Norsini says that people in the Public Works Department are helping to figure out how to save money, that's meaningful to me as a taxpayer. So thank you. Now, I didn't have much time to look through this, and I look forward to participating in the workshops that are coming up.
I'm sorry, you have to address the board. Look it up.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking to the commissioners, not the staff, okay?
When I first opened this document and quickly started looking through the executive summary, because I know that's where you start, and I saw 1.42%, I thought I must be looking at some other township, because I know that we've had these discussions where taxes need to go up 30, 40% in order to account for our all these unfunded liabilities. Maybe part of this is coming through this VCSP, which is a very large, significant amount of money. I don't know where that stands. I don't know how likely that is. If we can get that, great. Seems like it's $2-3 million that can be added to our budget to help address some of those problems. As I got a little further into this, I saw this tipping fee issue of $36, and I'm a resident that I pay more than the average. So to me, I kind of like the idea. I appreciate what you were saying, Mr. Spengler. I don't really want another bill, and it's something else that you can say, well, that's their problem. That's not part of your township. From a resident, a taxpayer, I'd kind of rather pay a fixed fee than have it included in the millage rate. But I think there's something a little strange about the math going on there, because if you add, I did a calculation that showed the $36 would require about a 3% millage increase based on something in here that said the 1.42% was about $16 for the average taxpayer. So I just did a calculation and said, well, $36 would be about another 3%. Mr. White had a slide that I hadn't seen before. I think you said it was 2.1%. But in any event, what we're doing is we're taking $240,000, 200 of which used to be paid as part of the millage rate, and we're stripping that entire 240 out, not just the incremental $40,000 being assessed in 2013. We're taking 240 out, so we're kind of lowering the old budget by $200,000. When you get into this, it's sort of hard to understand unless you're looking at the numbers, but I would have thought that this fee, since 200,000 of it is already in our tax base, that you'd be talking about just taking $40,000 as the amount that would be paid per resident, because that's the incremental amount. In any event, if you include that in there, I think the tax increase looks more like 4 to 5%. I sense that we're sort of kicking the problem down the road a little bit here, and when we get into this, we can evaluate that some more. Everybody understands that we have these massive unfunded liabilities, which is good, and we have to address that sometime, and maybe there'll be some magic bullets like this VCSP. But I just want everybody to keep in mind, including you all know it, but the members of the tax-paying public, that we do have big issues that we have to address going forward here as well. There was a mention of the 2.5% CPI increase and hiring 5 or 6 additional police officers. I don't doubt that we need to get our police force to the right strength. I don't know what that is. I think Mr. Zinkowski was saying that he's working with the police department before these contracts are renewed sometime next year, in advance of that, to figure out some way that if we hire new officers, we're not burdening the township with these extreme benefit liabilities that we have that's causing such a problem now. This isn't something that the police officers caused. I understand that, but if we hire five more officers, that's a 15% increase in our police force. If we don't hire them under some different sort of structure, we're just compounding that problem that we already have for the entire life that these police officers are going to be working for the township. And then the last thing was the, in terms of this 2.5% CPI increase that I know is built into the contracts, I hope that when we get into renegotiating these contracts next year, one of the benefits of having this process for the past year is I hope that our employees, both union and non-union, understand the major headwinds that the township faces. I know that you all do. I know that our management does. So I hope that when we get into addressing these contracts, we don't have increases that are 2.5% well above the CPI without having some sort of accommodation on benefits or other types of things that would lower the overall cost of these employees going forward.
Dan, part of the thing you may not know is that they took zeros for us in the past. So the 2.5, if you look at it for a year that was zero, it's really half of that.
Oh, okay. So you're saying over time it averages out something less. And I guess the final thing is everybody's getting a 2.5% increase, but our township manager who's running this process is getting nothing. Unless he has some sort of big perks I don't know about, I'd suggest he get at least a CPI increase. Thank you.
Can I make one comment about the kicking it down the road, which we are technically kicking down the long-term liability in that we have not in this budget instituted a tax increase earmarked specifically for those costs. However, I just want to keep reminding us all that in 2012, we made a $3 million allocation of money towards those long-term liabilities, and we funded the pay-as-you-go payments. In 2013, we are projecting making a $2 million payment towards those long-term liabilities, and we are including the pay-as-you-go payments in the budget. So it's not like we're ignoring the liabilities altogether. We're taking everything we can scrape together and shoving them towards those liabilities in a more informal manner. And we recognize it needs to be formalized, and we recognize we need to fund it more consistently, independently, but we are addressing it in 2012 and 2013.
Yes, I think that's a great point. It has to be made. And also, we're eliminating our absences, that liability we had for unpaid absences. So we've eliminated one of them. We've contributed something on the order of $4 million. We're a $25 million $25 million activity. So I think we're making a sizable step in that direction, in my opinion.
Any other public comment?
Kathy Mulroy from the Radnor Memorial Library, and I would like to echo everyone's comments. I actually am not a really good spreadsheet person, but I was able to follow this budget very clearly. I want to thank Mr. Zinkowski, Mr. White, and Mr. Norsini for including our needs for the coming year. We truly appreciate it. We know these are difficult decisions. We feel we return a lot on your investment every year. And so we wish to also thank the commissioners.
Thank you. Final comment from the staff?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, real quickly, there's two members of CARFAC here tonight, and without putting them on the spot or asking them to say anything, I just want to make sure that they're recognized for their contributions as well. So thank you both, and thank you for being here tonight.
I'd like the manager, they're foregoing the 2.5 increase in their salary.
No, they can have 2.5 increase. You can have a 20% increase. 2.5 times 0.
Any other commissioner comment? Thank you all for coming. Again, staff, thank you for the tremendous job. We appreciate it, and we look forward to moving forward with this budget. Meeting's adjourned.